The full weight of it bore down on him. It confirmed everything he had suspected about the queen and her brother. It meant the entire succession was a lie. If Robert learned the truth, war could erupt. Tywin Lannister would never let such an accusation pass unanswered. And Robert, he might demand blood for the deception, or lose himself in a drunken rage that would tear the realm apart. Ned recalled the promise he had made to keep the realm safe. If he handled this revelation recklessly, it could plunge the Seven Kingdoms into chaos. So instead of rushing to Robert, brandishing accusations, Ned steeled his heart and decided upon a more diplomatic approach. He could not keep the secret forever, but perhaps he could use it to carefully guide the realm away from outright war. If the truth must come out, it should come out in a way that did not destroy everything. Summer's heat grew heavy in the capital, and tensions simmered just beneath the surface. Rumors flew through the streets, whispers of the king's drunken outbursts, of the Lannisters' watchful eyes, of the new hand's quiet inquiries. Ned heard them all, but revealed nothing. Each day he grew more certain of the incest. Each day he prayed to the old gods for guidance. He was not made for politics, but for the sake of his family and the realm, he forced himself to adapt. At last, an opportunity presented itself. Robert, in a fit of good humor after a victory at the melee in the tourney, summoned the small council and included the queen at the meeting as well. Cersei arrived in a swirl of green silk, with Jaime trailing her, though the Kingslayer was not officially on the council. The presence of both Lannisters set the tension in the air. Ned, seated near the king, had to keep his composure as he faced them across the table. The topic at hand concerned the tensions with House Tully over certain border disputes, and Robert, already half distracted, looked to Ned for guidance. Ned spoke calmly, aware that the Lannisters studied his every word. "With your leave, your grace, it might be wise to send an envoy to Riverrun, to clarify the matter with Lord Hoster Tully. A show of respect could prevent a more serious conflict." Cersei tilted her head. "A show of respect indeed. And how would you suggest we clarify these matters? By coddling them? I doubt House Tully would yield so easily. Sometimes, force is more convincing." Ned met her gaze with measured neutrality. "Force is costly, your grace. With diplomacy, we might avoid a needless skirmish. The realm already struggles with debts. Adding the cost of a campaign would be unwise." Jaime, who stood behind Cersei, chimed in. "But sometimes a campaign is exactly what's needed to remind the lords that the Iron Throne does not negotiate from weakness." There it was, the pressure from the Lannisters to show strength, or perhaps to escalate tensions in a way that would advantage them. Ned thought quickly. He remembered that Tywin Lannister had once famously used overwhelming force to settle petty disputes. It was their way, rule through fear or at least the threat of it. But Ned pressed on with calm logic, never letting his frustration show. "We do not negotiate from weakness, Ser Jaime. If we approach this from a position of honor and reason, we show that the king's justice is not arbitrary. That, in itself, is a type of strength." Robert, blowing out a breath, seemed relieved that someone would do the thinking for him. "Enough, enough. I can't be bothered with more war, not right now. Let's send an envoy, see what Tully wants. If he's being stubborn, we'll do as Ned says. Gods know we can't afford another conflict over trifles." Cersei's emerald eyes flashed, but she pasted on a thin smile. "As you wish, your grace." It was a small triumph for Ned, keeping the peace in this matter, at least for the moment. Yet it also reminded him how precarious his position was. The Lannisters, though discomfited, would not forget who had stood in the way of their preferred approach. The chance to confront Cersei alone came soon after. She crossed paths with Ned in the gardens just before dusk, while the breeze carried the scents of flowers and the hush of crickets. She wore a robe of purple silk, her hair braided with gold ribbons. She seemed almost tranquil in that moment, though Ned suspected it was but another mask. "My Lord Hand," she greeted in a cool voice. "Your Grace," Ned answered, inclining his head politely. They walked together among the rose bushes, an unlikely pairing of wolf and lion. "I've noticed your approach to matters of state," she began, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "You value caution and courtesy. It's a change from what I've heard of you in the rebellion, when you were quite decisive in war." Ned felt her testing him. "War and governance are different beasts, Your Grace," he said. "Sometimes, rashness in governance leads to ruin." Her lips quirked in a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Indeed, we wouldn't want that, would we? Yet sometimes caution can look like weakness. The realm can be restless. When the wolves do not show their teeth, the lions feel emboldened. Or so the story goes." They paused by a low stone wall draped in flowering vines. Ned folded his hands behind his back. "Better for the wolves and lions to keep peace, don't you think? After all, if they tear each other apart, the rest of the kingdom suffers as well." Cersei turned to face him fully, her chin lifting. "I wonder if you truly believe that, or if you're simply trying to keep your head down until you find a way to strike." Ned met her gaze. "Your Grace, I'm here to serve the king and the realm, not to strike anyone unless I am forced to." The queen held his stare a moment longer, then turned gracefully away. "Perhaps. You impress me, Lord Stark, though I can't say I entirely trust you. But then again, I trust very few." That was the truth. He heard it in her voice. He recognized her fierce loyalty to those she considered hers. Her children, certainly, and Jaime by extension. He wondered if she sensed that he was on the edge of discovering their secret. Yet she gave him no direct sign, and he was determined not to reveal any suspicion. He would keep the realm's peace. He would not let Robert be manipulated so easily. They parted in silence, the garden's perfume lingering behind them. Ned realized his hands were trembling slightly, not out of fear, but from the tension of speaking so carefully with the queen he suspected of high treason. He took a deep breath and composed himself. Diplomacy, he reminded himself. Keep the secrets close until there is a plan to handle the consequences. Letters from Stannis Baratheon arrived only in the form of curt replies. The Lord of Dragonstone would not be attending King's Landing anytime soon, stating pressing duties on his island fortress. That raised Ned's suspicions further. If Stannis had discovered the truth, perhaps he left to plan his own move. Or perhaps he feared the Lannisters would kill him as well. Regardless, Ned found himself carrying the burden alone. He could not confide in Robert without risking an immediate and possibly disastrous confrontation. He could not approach Cersei openly, nor could he remain silent forever. The question was, how to use this knowledge to ensure an orderly succession, or at least to keep the realm from fracturing. If the children were not Robert's, then the rightful heir might be Stannis, a hard and humorless man, but honest in his own rigid way. What if there was a path to handle this that avoided bloodshed? If Ned could persuade the queen to step aside quietly, or if he could orchestrate some arrangement that recognized the true succession without forcing the realm into war. But that seemed a fool's hope. The Lannisters were not the type to relinquish power meekly. Still, part of him, the part that recalled the vow he had made to Robert and to the dead Jon Arryn, felt it was his duty to warn the queen first, to give her a chance to flee. In the canon of his personal honor, giving her the option to save herself and her children from Robert's wrath was the moral path. He had once resolved to do just that. But was that wise now? He wrestled with the question for days. Winterfell's Godswood was far away, and the Heart Tree's eyes could not give him counsel here. But he knew what the Honorable Ned Stark would do. He would offer the queen the chance to remove herself, to protect her children from the king's retribution. He would do so with dignity, expecting that justice required some measure of mercy. Yet this was King's Landing. This was the place where honor and justice so easily became weakness. Perhaps there was a middle road, a way to speak to Cersei, to reveal that he knew without demanding her immediate downfall, a chance to gauge her reaction, see if she might propose a peaceful solution. He doubted it, but maybe, just maybe, she would fear exposure enough to strike a compromise. He asked Cersei for a private audience, specifying that he wished to speak about sensitive matters of state. She agreed, but insisted on meeting in her solar rather than his. Ned acquiesced, though he understood the risk. Within her domain, she held the advantage. He arrived at midday, leaving his guards stationed outside. He was sure her own men waited in the corridor, but that was inevitable. Seated across from her at a small table bearing fruit and chilled wine, Ned felt the tension coil in his chest. Cersei took a sip of the wine before speaking. "So, Lord Hand, what is it that requires such discretion?" Ned exhaled slowly. "I have uncovered certain irregularities regarding the succession. With respect, Your Grace, I believe Lord Arryn stumbled on the same facts before his death." Her spine went rigid. Her green eyes bored into his. He saw her knuckles tighten around the stem of her cup. "Go on." He chose his words with care. "I have reason to believe that the children, Prince Joffrey, Princess Myrcella, Prince Tommen, bear traits that do not align with King Robert's line. The Lannister blood, it seems, runs too thick." Silence. A heartbeat of time that felt like an eternity. Then Cersei placed her cup down with deliberate precision. "I see Jon Arryn taught you well," she said softly, voice as cold as a blade. "And do you now intend to inform Robert of these suspicions, Lord Stark?" Ned kept his tone level. "I have not informed him yet. I am here, speaking with you, precisely because I do not wish to bring ruin upon the realm, or upon innocent children. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, they are not to blame for the circumstances of their birth." He saw her eyes flash with anger. "How noble of you. Still, that doesn't answer my question. What do you plan to do with your precious knowledge, if not use it to destroy me and my children?" His next words came out steady, though his heart hammered in his chest. "I want no war. I want no bloodshed. But the truth cannot be buried forever. If I keep it from Robert indefinitely, we both know it will surface. Perhaps from another source, perhaps at a worse time. The consequences would be far more catastrophic." She rose abruptly, pacing along the windowsill, her robe swirling around her ankles like a storm cloud. He watched the tension in her posture, the subtle tremor in her jaw. "You say you don't want war, yet you hold the power to ignite it in your hands. What do you expect me to do? Confess and let Robert kill us all?" Ned forced himself to remain seated, to keep his voice calm. "I don't think Robert would kill your children. He is many things, but not so monstrous. Even so, I see your predicament. That is why I'm here, speaking to you directly. If there is a way to avert violence, I will find it. But I need your cooperation, or else we court disaster." She turned to him, her face a mask of proud defiance. "Disaster is what you threaten me with? And now you ask for my cooperation?" Ned took a moment to weigh his reply. He thought of his wife, Catelyn, and their children back in the Red Keep. If this conversation went poorly, if Cersei decided to strike first, everything could spiral beyond control. Yet he refused to be cowed. "I speak to you as a father, as a man who would protect his children if he could. This realm does not need another war. Look at how Robert's rebellion tore us apart once already. The Targaryens are gone, but if the houses turn on each other again..." Cersei gave a short, humorless laugh. "You don't understand the Lannisters if you think we'll relinquish our hold on power so tamely. My father is not a man to stand idle while our name is cast into infamy. I have done what I must to secure my family's place." She paused, her eyes searching Ned's face. "I see in you a certain softness, a desire for mercy. That softness might be your undoing." Ned inclined his head. "Perhaps. But if you speak of your father, you must know Tywin Lannister would measure the cost of war just as carefully. Gold can buy armies, but war can cost even more gold and far more blood. He might yet be persuaded that a peaceful settlement is preferable." For a moment, she seemed on the brink of retort, but then her expression shifted. A flicker of desperation crossed her face, so brief that Ned nearly missed it. "You presume a great deal about my father. If he knew you were confronting me like this, do you think he'd let you leave King's Landing alive?" "I'm certain he would weigh all the outcomes first," Ned replied quietly. "And in the meantime, as long as Robert remains on the throne, neither of us can act with outright hostility. If war breaks out, who truly wins? The Targaryen pretender across the sea? The Tyrells or Martells, seeking revenge for old wounds? War will only invite opportunists to tear us all apart." She considered his words, lips pressed thin. So you propose we do what? Keep this secret while we negotiate terms? You want me to go to Robert and say, yes, I betrayed you, but let's remain cordial for the good of the realm? He'd tear my head from my shoulders. Ned's expression softened. I don't expect a confession, not yet. But if you and your children left King's Landing quietly, if you returned to Casterly Rock or found refuge somewhere else, you might avoid Robert's initial wrath. Perhaps that is how we can avoid open war. I would inform Robert in a way that does not incite him to madness. He would have time to calm his fury before he could do anything rash. She was silent, a series of emotions passing over her features. Horror, anger, pride, sorrow, and finally a cold resolve. Leave King's Landing? Abandon the throne? You ask me to tear my son away from everything he's ever known. You ask me to break the betrothal with your precious daughter Sansa. No doubt. And to sever our hold on the Iron Throne. Ned bowed his head. It may be the only way to avoid bloodshed, Your Grace. In time, if the realm is stabilized, you might petition for some arrangement, some formal acknowledgement of your children's station, though not as heirs. It would be more than they'd receive if Robert discovered this on his own and demanded their heads. Her eyes burned with tears, but they did not fall. And what of Jaime? Would you have him cast aside his white cloak and flee with us? He is sworn to protect the king. At that, Ned said nothing for a moment. Jaime must decide for himself. I speak only of a path that might save countless lives. The alternative is to wait until the truth explodes in your face. You know how Robert can be, how Tywin can be. If the realm is forced to pick sides, we'll see war at every border. This is not a threat. It's the reality of what we face. Cersei's jaw tightened. The gold in her hair seemed to blaze with the last of the afternoon's sunlight. At length, she composed herself enough to speak. You are a fool, Lord Stark, an honorable fool, but part of me wishes I could believe in your solution. Do you honestly think my father would yield? That Robert would allow me to simply walk away? Ned rose from his seat slowly, determined to maintain an air of calm. I cannot predict all outcomes, but I know that war would be worse. You must know that too. If you cannot or will not consider this offer, then the realm will pay the price. She studied him with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. I hear your words, but I cannot promise anything. I'll speak with my brother. I'll consider what is best for my children. But do not assume you can move me like a piece on your board. I don't assume that, Ned replied. I only hope the Queen has enough love for her children and for the realm to avoid madness. Her retort was laced with venom, but also a strange softness at the edges. You should go now, before I change my mind about letting you walk out of this room alive. Without another word, Ned bowed and left, his heart pounding. For the first time, he had laid out the truth before Cersei Lannister. She had not denied it. She had not struck him down. If there was a chance, however slim, that she would choose to flee with her children and avert the bloodshed, Ned had to cling to it. He knew he had placed himself in grave danger by revealing his hand, but he also knew he could not stand idle while the realm moved toward catastrophe. That night, Ned did not sleep well. Each creak of the corridor, each gust of wind against the shutters, made him half expect the gold cloaks to appear and drag him to the dungeons. Yet when dawn came, he was still alive, and the Red Keep remained eerily peaceful. If Cersei was planning a counterstrike, she was biding her time. In the days that followed, Ned continued his duties, never letting on that anything had changed. He issued orders about city affairs, settled disputes, and quietly asked Baelish and Varys to keep him informed of the slightest shift in the Lannisters' movements. Both men seemed intrigued by his new watchfulness but refrained from prying too directly. They were spymasters in their own right, dancing on the edges of every secret. An uneasy hush fell over the court. Cersei did not cross paths with Ned in public, but he sensed she was up to something. Jaime, too, grew strangely subdued. Tyrion had vanished, reportedly on a journey of his own. Ned wondered if that was mere coincidence or if the imp had chosen to be absent for whatever would come next. Finally, one evening, a messenger arrived at Ned's chamber with a summons from the Queen. She wished to speak with him immediately in the royal solar. The cryptic tone of the note set his nerves on edge. He prepared himself, donned his cloak, strapped on the dagger he kept hidden at his belt. He told Jory to stand ready outside the corridor in case something went awry. Stepping inside the solar, Ned found the Queen alone, perched on the edge of a chair by the hearth, dressed in a somber gown of dark green. A single candle lit the room, casting dancing shadows across the floor. Cersei gestured for him to close the door, which he did carefully. She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Lord Stark, I have thought about our last conversation. I have spoken to Jaime, and I have sent word to my father. We have weighed the matter carefully, and we see that you hold all the cards, or so you believe. But there may be a path to avoid war if you are willing to concede certain points." Ned felt a surge of hope tempered by caution. "I am listening." The Queen's voice was steady, though the candlelight revealed a faint tremor in her hands. "My children will not flee King's Landing, nor will I. That is not an option Jaime or my father would ever allow. We have too much at stake. However, we might propose a compromise. If Robert remains ignorant, if you allow Joffrey's status to remain unquestioned, we can keep the peace. We will, in exchange, give you certain guarantees. Your daughter Sansa's marriage to Joffrey will be honored. Your family will maintain its position and holdings, and we will move to reduce the crown's debts to the Lannisters. Perhaps even restore a measure of solvency." The word struck Ned like a blow. "You ask me to remain silent? To let a false heir sit upon the throne? To vow my daughter to him? That would be a betrayal of Robert and the entire realm." Her mouth formed a thin line. "It would be survival, Lord Stark. Do you not see how precarious Robert's rule is? He's drowning in debt. He's lost interest in governance. And the realm sees Joffrey as his son. Uprooting that myth would do more harm than good." Ned's anger smoldered beneath the surface, but he kept it in check. "You would ask me to betray the truth itself, Your Grace. I came here to serve Robert, not to mislead him." She lifted her chin. "Truth is a fickle weapon, Lord Stark. You claim to care about the realm's well-being. This realm might be stronger if Joffrey were to succeed. Do you honestly believe Robert's brothers would do any better? Renly is charming but frivolous. Stannis is honest but harsh. They would tear the realm apart in competition, and the Lannisters would not sit idle. I promise you that. We have the gold, we have the armies. Support Joffrey, keep the lie intact, and the realm might know peace, though it's built on a fragile foundation." Ned closed his eyes, remembering the weight of his vow to Robert, the memory of Jon Arryn, the love he bore for his own family. He felt as though he stood at a crossroads where every path led to betrayal of something he held dear. "And if I refuse?" Cersei's gaze darkened. "Then you bring war upon us all. Your head will be the first to roll, but it won't stop there. My father will not rest until the North bends the knee or is broken. Robert's fury will burn half the kingdom before he's done. Is that truly what you desire?" His voice was thick with conflict. "No. I desire a realm in which honor still has meaning, a realm in which we do not seat bastards on the throne and call them kings." Her face hardened. "Then we are at an impasse. I have said my piece. The next time we speak of this, the choices may be far fewer." For a long, pulsing moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ned bowed stiffly and turned to go. His mind churned with doubt, fear, and anger. Behind him, he heard her whisper, as if to herself, "When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground." He stepped out into the corridor, his heart pounding. He had done everything in his power to be diplomatic, to avoid an open rift. But the truth demanded to be acknowledged. If Cersei and Jaime refused to yield, if Tywin threatened war, then the delicate balance might soon shatter. Perhaps all Ned had accomplished was to delay the inevitable. Yet in that delay, there might still be hope for a peaceful outcome, or at least a smaller conflagration. He could only pray to the old gods that his attempt at diplomacy would buy him the time he needed, and that when the lines were drawn, He would be able to save his family, the realm, and perhaps even the queen's innocent children from the bloodshed to come.